I live on a farm outside of a city that currently has a population of around 1,700 people. It's a small town that was built along the railroad back in the late 1800s. Most of the original buildings are still standing along Main Street. Some of them are pretty cool, and over the years, I have explored most of them. My favorite was a large building that was a flower store and phones/service. The flower store took up the entire first floor, while the phones and service used the entire basement. At the time, I was around 10 years old, and my father was working with the phone guy over the winter. After school, I would walk about a mile through the snow and wait around in the flower shop for about 4 hours till I could get a ride back to the farm with my dad. I would get extremely bored in there, so I would come up with stuff to do. I would draw on my sketch pad or hang out in my little mock office that I had constructed in the back rooms. One day, however, I found this door in the basement. I asked the guy my dad worked with what it led to. He unlocked it for me and revealed a very old rope elevator, the kind you stand on and pull on the rope and you go up or down. He told me to get on it, so I did. He then proceeded to take us to the upper level of the building. The upper door led to a hallway with a door at the end of it. He showed me that the door has a tiny hatch at about adult eye level. I was then told that this place was used for drinking in the days of Prohibition. People wanting to get in and drink would have to talk their way in through that little hatch. The room on the other side of the door was huge. It had a long, old-style bar. There was obviously a dance floor and other things. There were lots of cobwebs and dust from the years it had not been used. This place amazed me. The history of the upper level of a flower shop. That's what got me started on exploring. Over the years, I managed to get inside almost all of the buildings that were located on Main Street. A couple had been converted to small apartments, so I could not look into those. The upper level of the furniture store was great. It also appeared to be used for drinking back in the days of Prohibition. There was one building that I kept wanting to get into, but never could. The building was the old movie theater. It was located on the end of Main Street. The theater was used right when motion pictures came out, but caught fire and was burned pretty badly. Quite a few people died when this happened. They did fix it up and tried to get the movies going again, but nobody wanted to go to the shows there. They would rather travel the 20 miles to a nearby city, so the theater was shut down for good. This was around the late 1930s, I believe. So this thing had sat with its door locked for the better part of 70 years. I wanted to get into this building badly. It took me quite a few years to gain access to it. Many years later, I was able to get into it. I was older and ready to give it a shot. The other buildings I had explored were still being used, so I would just ask for permission from the owners. This one was illegal to get into, however. I had to wait till about 2 in the morning when the town was dead. The streetlights go off at 2 a.m., so that is my chance to go unnoticed. I used a crowbar to wrench the padlock setup they had on the door off. There was just a single door in the front, so I had to use that. The door opened up, revealing stairs going down into what I called extreme darkness. You know how you can stand in the dark and still kinda see after your eyes adjust? Well, in this dark, you could not see anything. It was like being in a cave because there was absolutely no light source down there. Thankfully, I had brought a mag light and a lantern, so it wasn't that big of a deal. I made my way down the steps, making sure to close the door on my way down. I did not want anybody to know I was there, since it was trespassing. The stairs led down quite a ways. Soon, the hot, humid summer air ended and was replaced with cold, dank air. It was quite a relief, actually. The air was pretty stagnant, however. Anyway, the stairs leading down met up with a sort of short hallway, then stairs leading up. It did not make any sense to me then, and still does not now. I walked up those stairs and come to another door. Thankfully, there was no lock on it, nor the handle. I simply pushed it open and walked into the room. The room I entered was the lobby, a moderately large room with a booth for tickets and some old chairs fixed to the floor. The lobby did not yield anything interesting, so I marched onward. I walked down a narrow hallway and came to the screen room. It was not very large at all. It was about the size of a 2-car garage. The screen was gone, but the seats were still all intact. There was no projector room that I could see, but a fixed metal stand was in the back of the room. I could only assume that the film projector must have sat on top of it. I looked around for a while and found an old wheat penny. Finally, this exploration was paying off. I walked back to the lobby to check out the doorway that I saw before. The light from my lantern showed a padlock on this door. That must mean there was some good stuff behind it. I pry off the lock and open the door. Inside is a small room that used to be an office. There is an old rotting desk in it, a wooden chair, and newspapers lying all over the floor. I tried to look at the newspapers, but the years of humidity had gotten to their print. There was nothing of interest in the desk, and the only framed picture on the wall was a painting of a flower pot. There was another door at the other end of the office though, so I moved on to it. I tried to open it, but it would not budge. The door was warped pretty badly. I had to shoulder it a couple times to get it to pop open. When it did, I almost tumbled quite a ways. Behind the door was steps leading down. I figured it must be the basement. I made my way down the creaky old stairs and walked into a very large room. I compared it to a basketball court in my mind. Scattered through the room were old brick pillars that made up the support for the building. Some of them were in bad shape, but still appeared to be holding strong. As I'm checking out one of the pillars, I hear the pitter-patter of feet off in the darkness behind me. I whipped out the mag light and shone it around. I can't see anything, however. I chalked it up to my imagination and continued my exploring. I first checked out what would be the north end of the room, and I see a bunch of stuff under sheets. I pulled them off to find chairs stacked up neatly. Nothing too interesting. Next to the chairs are some boxes with old movie reels in them. I really wanted to take one with me, but I didn't. I'm not a thief. More pattering off in the distance alarmed me. I call out to determine if anyone is there, but I am met with no answers. I had thought that someone had followed me into the theater, or that there was an animal in here with me. The mag light did not shine as far as it normally would. The light would cut out after about 8 feet, so I didn't have a good view of everything that was around me. I was on guard now, since I knew that something was in here. I started walking towards the noise with the flashlight and lantern glowing. I reached a wall and had not seen anything. I didn't know what to think at that point. It's an old building though, so it could just be random noises that old buildings make. I decided to walk toward the east wall and check out anything that might be over there. I get there and find a ton of wooden boxes piled to the ceiling, which was about 7 feet high. I start grabbing them off the top and checking the contents. There is nothing inside the boxes. All of the ones I searched for are empty. I get down to about 4 feet and see something behind where I had just pulled the box from. It's the outline of a hole. This interested me greatly. I quickly remove the other boxes that are along the wall, and am soon greeted with a large hole in the wall. It is about 4 feet tall and 3 feet wide. It wasn't neatly cut out of the wall either. It seemed that bricks were torn from the foundation to reveal this hole. I shine my light into the hole and can now see a tunnel of sorts. It is very crudely made. It looked like something you would see in a prison escape movie. Rough walls lined it, and it was kinda circular. The floor of it was flat though. It took me all but a half second to decide to explore it. A tunnel under a town in Iowa. How often do you find something like this? I hunched over and stepped into the tunnel. I heard that pattering noise behind me once again. I looked over my shoulder and see nothing. I shrugged it off and started going into the tunnel. After about 10 feet, the tunnel started to shrink a bit. It is now about 3.5 feet tall. For a 6-foot person at the time, that is quite a strain. I hunched over and started moving slowly onward. I was basically walking with my rear end on my feet. About 20 feet in, the tunnel takes a sharp turn to the left. Then after another 20 feet, it opened up into a small room. Well, not really a room, more like a bigger, wider opening. I noticed 2 tunnels cut off from this one, and I decided to take the one on the right. I stepped into the room and heard crunching coming from under my feet. I look down and see skeletons of all sorts of stuff. I'm not a doctor or archaeologist or any of that, but they looked like cat, rat, and rabbit skeletons. This spooked me a little bit. Off on the other side of the room Near the right tunnel was a decaying cat. Good times, good times. I could only assume that there was another way into this system of tunnels if animals were getting in. I walked over the skeletons and went through the right tunnel. It's a winding bastard too. Every few feet, I would have to turn one way or the other. I walked a bit further and felt breeze on my sweaty face. I must have found the opening that I was thinking about. Sure enough, there was a chunk about the size of a couple shoeboxes missing out of the ceiling. I shone my light upwards and saw rounded concrete and must be under a culvert or something. I walked onward and am soon met with a collapsed section. Well, that's encouraging. I turned around and started to head back to the bone room, but I felt vibrations. I shone the light around and see some rocks tumbling from around the collapsed section. A roaring noise then echoes through the tunnel. I recognized that sound. It was a tractor. He must be driving on the road near the culvert. I found it strange that this thing is so shallow where I am. I had not even noticed that I was slowly moving upwards when I was going down the right tunnel. I walked back to the bone room at that point. I looked down to make sure I did not step on the decaying cat, but it was gone. Did I miss something? I shone the light around the little room, and it is nowhere to be seen. After that, I did the only other logical thing. I stepped into the other tunnel, branching off from the room. Now, this one was really small. I had to literally crawl through it on my hands and knees. So, I left my lantern in the room and started crawling. This was not fun at all. There were all sorts of sharp little rocks that my hands and knees were going over, and I was wearing shorts. I crawled about 30 feet in this tunnel and stopped to take a breather. I was able to sit down, hunched over. A minute later, my ears picked up a sound. It was a crunching noise. I stopped breathing so I can listen better. The sound is coming from the direction I was heading. I turn the flashlight on and shine it down the tunnel. A pair of orange eyes about 20 feet away greet me. This thing, it looks like a hairless, skeletal monkey. I let out a hearty, what the hell. The beast whips up, sees the light, and disappears in a flash. I had seen enough. I quickly shuffled around and was met face to face with this thing. It lets out this horrible, what I can only describe as a bark at me. I jumped up and slammed my head into the ceiling above me. I writhed in pain and felt blood pouring out of a cut in my head. I must have hit a sharp rock. I started crawling as fast as I could towards the bone room. I get to the little room and shone the light back into the darkness. About 10 feet away is that thing. It's licking the ground where my blood had trailed. It keeps licking away, but eyeballs me and growls. Wow, isn't this just great? This thing likes blood. I'm getting the hell out of this place. I tried to run through the bone room, but tripped and scrambled to stand up in all these dead animals. I run to the tunnel and duck so I can head right into it. I did not duck well enough. Pow, my forehead smacks into the wall. That knocks me on my rear end. Now my head is in some serious pain. I can't tell if I'm bleeding from my forehead because my face is already covered in blood from a minute earlier. I ignored the pain as best as I could and made haste down the tunnel. I was breathing extremely hard. This was way too much for me. I burst out of the tunnel and into the basement of the theater. I started flinging wooden boxes in front of the tunnel in a vain attempt to block whatever was in there. I get a bunch piled in front and start hustling for the stairs. It's never that easy though. I get there and the stairs are gone. Just a wall. What in the name of God is going on? As it turns out, I had just ran to the wrong wall. A quick sprint to another wall revealed the staircase. I started to run up it, but hear boxes smashing behind me. I hold my rear end up the stairs because right after the smashing boxes came the sound of loud pattering like a dog's paw on concrete. I got into the office I was in and slammed the door. I kicked and kicked at it till the warping did its natural locking effect. Not even a second later, the door started thumping as if something was banging into it. Then a clawing noise started happening. I ran over and shoved the desk in front of the door. I did all this while holding my poor maglite. If I had brought some plastic piece of crap, it would have been dark by the time I scrambled out of that tunnel. I stepped back and watched the door and desk shudder as something kept pounding at it. The pounding stopped as soon as it started. Then there was just silence. The silence did not last too long, however. I heard a clicking noise off in the distance. It sounded mechanical. I walked out into the lobby and the noise grew. What the hell is that noise? It was coming from the screen room. My curiosity got the best of me, even after all of that. I walked to the hallway and saw the glow of light from the screen room. Is someone in there? I asked. The second I entered the room, I saw a huge light square where the movie screen should be. It's coming from a non-existent projector. The light just started from midair and cast itself onto the brick wall where the screen would be. I stood in amazement, watching this unbelievable thing. Soon I could hear the sound of crying all around me. I snapped out of the hypnosis the light seemed to have over me and glanced around. There was no one there, but the crying was still happening. It was not distant or weird. It just sounded like people all around you were tearing up. I started to walk backwards to the hall. As soon as I reached the door leading out of the screen room, I hear something different. The cries had quit and erupted into screaming. The light from the non-existent projector turned blood red and coated the entire room. That was enough. I ran back into the lobby and towards the way out. I glanced over at the office as I ran past it and see the door fly open and the desk go skidding across the room. Crap, that thing had gotten out at a bad time. I ran down the steps to the exit. Behind me I could hear a sound that was a mix between a snarl and a gurgle. The thing was chasing me. I soon was running up to the door, leading outside. I sprinted up the steps and flew through the door into the outside world. I looked back in time to see the thing leaping towards the door at me. It disappeared as soon as I hit the doorway. I fell down to my hands and knees, trying to catch my breath. My kneeling turned into laying on the sidewalk. My head was pounding, and my face was sticky from blood. My hands and knees were covered in cuts and scrapes from my rapid exit out of the tunnel. I stood up and shut the door to the theater. Nothing was going to get me to go back in there. I walked back to my vehicle and remembered that I had left my lantern in the burn room. Oh well, it was a $30 Coleman, easily replaceable. I then drove home and nursed my wounds. About a year later, the town council decided to demolish a building that was 2 down from the theater. After destroying the foundation, they found a branch to the system of tunnels that I was in. It was quite the big discovery and hit the newspaper soon after it was found. The newspaper said that the tunnels were not even known about by any current living resident of the town. They were old and decrepit. The part of the article that caught my eye though was their speculation on why there was a modern-day lantern in the tunnel. I just chuckled at that. The branch they discovered must have been the one I was heading down when I saw the creature. The tunnels are still there. The town council decided to leave them be, since they presented no danger to the buildings around them. However, they are now watched over very well, since they don't want any meddling kids getting into them. That doesn't matter to me though. I am not going back in them. Okay, here's mine. Fair warning, I was drinking when this happened, but I was only about 4 beers deep, so I doubt I was hallucinating or some shit like that. Be me. Country just recently relaxed lockdown measures. Friends immediately call me and say that everyone's going to a party by the reservoir. Normally I wouldn't go to that kind of thing, but I've been stuck at home for like 2 months, so fuck it. Fast forward to Friday night. My friends and I are sitting in a semicircle on a grassy bank near the reservoir. There's like 100 people there, but everyone's sort of split up into groups. Fires are not allowed, but there's a floodlight nearby, so everyone is visible, but it's still really dark. Friend and I are all drinking and talking shit. Eventually hear bells, like the jingling of little bells that a fucking Christmas elf might wear on their shoes or some fanciful shit like that. Turn towards sound. Girl comes walking out of the dark from the direction of a nearby field, aka complete blackness. Nobody else was in that direction. First thing I notice is that she is really pretty, like stone cold hottie with a body. Hair is really messy, and she looks like she's wearing pajamas. Looks like she just got out of bed. She asks what we are all doing here. Partying? Lockdown is finally finished, so we're allowed out again. Oh, I was wondering why everyone had gone. Okay. My friend eventually asks her if she wants to sit down. She accepts. Fucking nice one. Now we got the hottest girl I've ever seen sitting next to me. We all start talking and partying again. She's actually really talkative and funny. Is this love, bros? Night continues. At a certain point, I get a bit too drunk and make the worst fucking mistake of my life. Quick edit. This girl introduced herself as Marigold. Thought it was super weird, but she was really hot, so I just went with it anyway. I noticed this flower growing on the bank next to where she was sitting, and she said it was really pretty. I get it in my drunk head to pick it up and give it to her. Real milady Reddit tier shit. I reach over her. I was on her right, and the flower was on her left, and pluck the flower. As I pull back, I hit her in the chin with the top of my head. What the fuck is wrong with me? Her hands are covering her face. I didn't know this at the time, but the rest of our group had drifted off a couple of feet, so we were sitting there alone. Oh shit, I'm so sorry. She's like, it's fine, I'm fine. She lowers her hands a bit. I can see like half of her face. Pic related is the closest thing I can find online that resembled it. She has a porcelain doll face. Not white as porcelain. It honest to God looked like it was made of porcelain. Painted like a medieval court jester with red lips and nose. Looked more comical than pic related. This was just the best I could find. Nose was longer and the face was almost half moon. Had the same kind of hat though. It split down the middle and had two tendril type things with little gold bells at the tips. I'm fucking terrified at this point. She looks like she noticed and quickly covers her face again. It looks like she was pressing it into face, like it was a mask, but it was more like she was a doll 1 minute and a human the next. She looks back at me again and smiles. She is perfect again, completely beautiful and charming. I just kinda sit there for a while, dazed. She eventually gets up and tells everyone she is leaving. That's when I realized that only I saw that. My friend says goodbye and asks if she needs a lift. She says no and just walks back off into the dark. After a few seconds, my female friends say it isn't safe and pressure the boys to go make sure she gets home safe. I flat out refuse, but 2 of her guys agree and go after her. They come back like 5 minutes later, saying she was gone. They never saw her anywhere. Eventually I went home, still kinda shell-shocked. The next day, I'm talking to my mates about it. All the guys are like, yeah, that girl was hot, but really fucking weird. None of them say they saw anything wrong with her face. Weird part comes later. I'm talking to my one female friend all about it. She had no idea what I am talking about. I'm like, remember that girl who came out of the field? That weird fucking girl. She says no. There was a weird person who came out of the field and sat with us, but it was a guy. She says it was a guy who called himself Marigold, and he was the hottest guy she had ever seen. All my female friends confirm the second story. They seem to all think it was weird that we all remember a different person, but only I saw the jester face. The orb of black smoke. Be me. B14. For the only second time in my life, we moved into a nice apartment that was not haunted. It was tiny though, and my stepmom and dad had big egos, so of course the small quaint place was not good enough, so we moved out after a year or 2. We moved into a rental home. It's a big gorgeous place with 2 floors and a beautiful large staircase. While the realtor was showing it to us, he showed us the upstairs hallway and pointed to a spot under the attic, a pull-down string in the ceiling. He casually mentioned an old Jewish man died in that home in that spot. My dad and stepmom don't care, and nod like he told them small talk about the weather. While we lived there, everyone was intense and on edge from fear constantly. No one would talk about what made everyone so scared. 2 cats and the 2 dogs stared at a corner where the staircase downstairs met the wall. All 4 animals stared with intense focus at empty air. None of the 4 would even go upstairs. In my room at night, I laid in bed. I turned off my light and saw a giant ball shaped like a perfect circle in front of my door in the corner of my room. It took up the entire corner from floor to ceiling. Around its edges were fast, flickering hazy, short, stumpy wisps of smoke. The whole thing looked made up out of rippling smoke with a center too dense to see through. It was pitch black, darker than my dark room. Could feel an evil happiness coming from it, and I could tell it felt joy from my fear. I'm convinced it put me into a trance because I told myself it was my imagination and didn't run the hell away. It wasn't until after we moved out after 2 years that I snapped out of it and realized that there was no way it was fake back then. The thing made me hear and see things to intensify my fear. I heard murmuring voices like a party of adults talking in another room where you can't pick out words. The noise came from the other side of my bedroom wall. If it wasn't for the fact that the other side of my wall was the open staircase, I would have thought my parents had guests over for a party. The thing forced me to imagine monsters, but the monsters were like a cardboard cutout compared to it. I would consistently imagine an imp or goblin creature next to my bed, but it was a fixed image that did not move. I would fight the thing by calming myself down. The more I calmed, the more it would force me to see scary monsters, till I saw a crowd of monsters around my bed, but I knew they were fake even when they scared me. They didn't move, like fake things frozen in place. The thing, by contrast, was constantly rippling its smoky short tentacles around its edges. It never wavered in my imagination, like when I tried to make imaginary friends as a kid. It was solid, and always there in the dark, even if I saw it from my mind's eye. It was harassing others in the home too, even if we did not talk about it. My stepmom mentioned it once to belittle it and then looked terrified up our stairs. I could feel its happiness. It knew she feared it. My dad waved Sage frantically around to drive it away every 2 weeks. For 2 weeks it would be gone and I would have relief, but it would always come back. My father, once outside the home, told me his psychic friend told him it left and came back when the sage smudge wore off. It would slip into the next door apartment and wait. My mental health deteriorated. Hilarious to me, my stepbrother, who was fit and 18, would look at me so terrified if we stopped to talk in the hallway. Maybe it was the blank stare. Maybe it was the crazy laughter from my room, because I would binge watch comedy shows to cope. Who knows, but I disturbed him, and I thought it was hilarious, of course, because he was a douche. Get extremely depressed. Pet hermit crab died from me being too depressed, and my stepmom mocked me for it. Major asshole took every chance to make me feel like shit. She loved to mock me for things I didn't know how to do, because I was neglected by my mom. Started to read constantly for escapism. Watched TV constantly in my room because my stepmom mocked me for anything she could think of when I stepped out to get water, food, or piss. Dad's idea of help was to shove me outside one day and say, go do something. We were in a maze of suburbs with no park within walking distance. No sense of direction to speak of. Sat on the porch for hours, waiting to be let back in. Started to draw disturbing pictures of monsters. Started reading JTHM and disturbing comic books with gore and monsters. I liked them because no one could hurt monsters. Stepmom got disturbed and said I needed to go to therapy. Yeah, now that I look like my deteriorated mental health might affect you personally, like I'd snap and kill, then it was time to not neglect. The therapist was worse than useless. I have extreme social anxiety, affective neglect and emotional abuse, and didn't talk the first 3 sessions out of fear. My dad saw it as wasted money and stopped sessions right when my mental health started to just barely improve. I made the mistake of getting excited and telling him about practicing chess. I wanted to play again with the therapist. My dad was angry and thought his money was spent on playing. You know, because his child he neglected the shit out of is supposed to sing like a canary about their feelings in therapy immediately. Both parents never asked me my opinion on anything in my entire life, so I've never questioned the therapy getting taken from me. Eventually, we move out to a big nice house because my dad almost died in a car accident and received a ton of money. Depression suddenly stopped being so severe. I snapped out of my trance that the thing had me in and was terrified it kept me from believing it was real.